Imagine discovering that some of the boldest scientific experiments never reached the public, simply because they were deemed too dangerous. What if I told you that throughout history, ideas as daring as they were terrifying were kept under lock and key? Experiments that, if carried out, could have radically changed the way we live today. But was the world ready for them? Today, we'll explore forbidden scientific experiments that nearly changed humanity. Stories of brilliant minds who dared to go beyond what was allowed and ended up facing ethical, political, or even the fear of creating something impossible to control. And the most intriguing part, many of these experiments actually worked, but were hushed up before they could gain traction. Have you ever thought about how a single decision could have altered the course of history? What would our world look like now? Get ready to travel through time and learn about everything from bizarre experiments in secret labs to projects so advanced they seem like science fiction. It's as if we've opened a forbidden drawer of history and found secrets inside that could rewrite humanity's fate. In today's video, you'll be shocked by discoveries that nearly spiraled out of control, inventions hidden due to fear of their consequences, and experiments that still challenge the boundaries of what's acceptable. Now, hold on tight. We'll start with something that seemed like simple medical curiosity, but could have completely transformed human life. Imagine if it were possible to swap bodies with another person. Literally. Sounds like a movie script, right? But believe it or not, scientists have tried something very close to this. In the 1950s, a Soviet doctor named Vladimir Demikov conducted experiments that shocked the world. He believed complex transplants could save lives and decided to prove his theory in an, let's say, extreme way. What did he do? He transplanted the head of one dog onto another dog. That's right, a two-headed dog, both heads conscious, both drinking water at the same time. The scene was so surreal it seemed like an aberration of nature. But the scariest part, it worked. For a few weeks the animal survived. It was as if science had advanced too quickly, without regard for ethical boundaries. And here's the part no one expected. Demikov's experiments inspired later research into organ transplants, something that saves millions of lives today. But the line between medical progress and scientific nightmare was far too thin. The international community reacted with horror, and his research was ultimately suppressed and banned. Now think about this. What if these ideas had been pursued without restrictions? Would we live in a world today where full-body transplants were possible? Or would we be dealing with consequences we can't even imagine? And speaking of science that terrifies, the next experiment involves nothing less than tampering with the human mind, literally. Imagine waking up one day to find that your memories were fabricated, that everything you swore you'd lived through might have been planted in your mind as part of a secret experiment. Sounds impossible? Well, that's exactly what some scientists attempted. During the Cold War, the United States launched a secret project called MK-Ultra. The goal? To discover mind control techniques. The government believed that if they could manipulate the human mind, they could create perfect soldiers, unbetrayable agents, and even induce confessions from enemies. To achieve this, bizarre tests were conducted. The use of hallucinogenic drugs like LSD, deep hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and even electric shocks. Often these were done without the consent of the subjects, some of whom were psychiatric hospital patients, unaware they were part of the experiment. And the most disturbing part, declassified documents later revealed that some of these techniques had drastic effects. People reported erased memories, behavioral breakdowns, and even irreversible trauma. It was like playing a game of erasing and reprogramming the human mind. The project was officially shut down, but to this day, it's unclear how much science actually learned and how much is still hidden in classified files. Now hold on to this thought. What if the knowledge of memory manipulation had gone public? Would we live in a world today where governments could literally edit our memories? And speaking of controlling the forces of nature, the next forbidden experiment is even more terrifying, manipulating the Earth's climate. What if I told you that at some point in history, scientists tried to play weather gods? Yes, secret projects aimed to manipulate storms, hurricanes, and even rainfall. One of the most famous was Project Popeye, conducted by the United States during the Vietnam War. The idea was simple yet terrifying. Use chemicals released into clouds to extend the monsoon season, those torrential rains typical of the region. The intended result? Turn roads into impassable mud pits and weaken the enemy. And it worked. Declassified documents revealed that the project successfully extended rainfall. Imagine that, using the sky itself as a weapon of war. But the backlash was immediate. When the world learned about this climate manipulation, the shock was palpable. If it was possible to cause rain, could it also be possible to create droughts, hurricanes, or even controlled environmental disasters? Due to fear of the consequences, experiments like this were banned by international treaties. Now think about this. What if this technology had continued in secret? Maybe today, some countries would have the power to control the world's climate. Perhaps they could turn deserts into fertile lands, or use hurricanes as weapons. Scary, right? But hold on tight, because the next forbidden experiment is even darker. Scientists who came dangerously close to creating artificial life in a lab. Picture the scene. A lab lit by cold fluorescent lights, test tubes bubbling, and a scientist staring intently at a tiny cell that didn't come from nature. Sounds like science fiction, but it really happened. In the 20th century, several researchers tried to create artificial life forms, as if attempting to replicate the zero moment of life on Earth. One of the most famous experiments was conducted by Stanley Miller and Harold Urey in 1953. They simulated the conditions of Earth's primordial atmosphere in a setup filled with gases and electrical discharges. The result? Amino acids, the building blocks of life, were formed. But some scientists went further. In secret labs, there were attempts to manipulate DNA in ways that could create entirely new organisms, something society wasn't sure it was ready to accept. After all, if it was possible to create life in a lab, who could guarantee that this life wouldn't become a threat? And here's the most curious detail. These studies paved the way for modern genetic engineering. Today we have bacteria programmed to produce medicines, pest-resistant plants, and even stem cell research that can regenerate human organs. But at the time, the idea of playing God seemed an unacceptable risk, and many of these studies were suppressed. Now imagine with me, what if an artificial life form had actually escaped from a lab in the 1950s? Would we be living alongside parallel species created by humans? And speaking of creating the unimaginable, the next forbidden experiment dealt with something even more dangerous, manipulating the Earth's very core. Picture this. You're living your life peacefully when you suddenly find out that scientists are trying to drill through the Earth's crust, all the way to the mantle. Sounds insane, but that was the goal of ambitious projects during the Cold War. The most famous of these was Project Mahole, launched by the United States in the 1960s. The mission? Drill kilometers through rock to collect samples from the Earth's mantle, that deep incandescent layer never before touched. The promise was revolutionary. Better understand the Earth's origins and perhaps predict earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. But there was a terrifying catch. Many feared that such drilling could unleash uncontrollable forces, like massive eruptions or even fissures that might disrupt the planet's balance. It was like poking a sleeping beast without knowing if it would wake up. The project was eventually abandoned due to lack of funding, but rumors persist that other powers tried similar experiments in secret. And to this day, scientists still haven't reached the mantle. They've only scratched the surface of the crust. Now think about it. What if Project Mahole had succeeded? Would we have uncovered secrets about the origins of life, or would we have triggered a global catastrophe? And here's the twist. While some were trying to drill into the Earth, others dared to look to the stars. The next forbidden experiment involved nothing less than detonating nuclear bombs in outer space. Imagine looking up at a starry night sky and suddenly seeing a nuclear explosion lighting up the cosmos. Sounds like science fiction, but it actually happened. In the 1950s and 1960s, during the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union conducted secret tests that seem unthinkable today. One of them was Starfish Prime in 1962. What did they do? They detonated a nuclear bomb over 400 kilometers above the Earth, right in the middle of space. The result was both spectacular and terrifying. The explosion created an artificial aurora visible thousands of kilometers away. But it also generated a massive electromagnetic pulse that damaged satellites, disrupted electrical systems, and revealed the destructive power of such experiments. It was as if humanity had discovered a way to shut down an entire planet's technology with a single click. And here's the most disturbing part. There was real fear that these explosions could damage Earth's atmosphere, destroy the ozone layer, or even permanently alter the planet's magnetic balance. Due to the danger, international treaties banned nuclear tests in space. But the question remains, what if these experiments had continued? Would space today be filled with radiation, dead satellites, and a completely different night sky? Now hold on tight. While some were detonating bombs in space, other scientists were obsessed with something much closer to home, the idea of extending human life at any cost. Who hasn't dreamed of living forever? It's an obsession that's followed humanity since the alchemists of the Middle Ages. But what if I told you that in secret labs, scientists actually tried to make that dream a reality? In the 20th century, researchers explored ways to radically extend human life. Some experiments involved hormones extracted from animals, blood transfusions from young to old, and even attempts to freeze entire bodies, the famous cryonics. The idea was simple yet terrifying. Preserve someone in ice until science could develop the technology to bring them back. The curious detail? Many of these studies were funded by millionaires and political leaders terrified of death. In some cases, scientists claimed they had rejuvenated animal test subjects, using techniques we'd now associate with genetic engineering. But here's the dark side. The risks were enormous. Uncontrolled cell manipulation led to aggressive cancers, deformities, and even immune system collapses. It was like tampering with a biological clock no one knew how to fix. Today, research into telomeres, stem cells, and gene therapies has revived this dream of extending life, but with far more caution. Still, the idea of defeating death remains one of science's greatest taboos. And the question lingers, if we had discovered immortality decades ago, would we be living on an overpopulated planet with people accumulating centuries of life? Now brace yourself, because the next forbidden experiment deals with something even more delicate, directly manipulating human DNA. Imagine a world where you could choose every trait of a baby before they're even born. Eye color, height, intelligence, disease resistance. Sounds like futuristic fiction, but some attempts in this direction have already happened, and many were banned before they could take off. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, labs in various countries began exploring genetic manipulation techniques, particularly with human DNA. The initial goal was noble: eliminate hereditary diseases and cure fatal conditions. But the line between medicine and eugenics quickly became dangerous. Rumors suggest that clandestine experiments attempted to edit human embryos in pursuit of genetic enhancement. Imagine creating a generation of superhumans designed in a lab. The problem? The risks were immense. Small errors could lead to unpredictable mutations, worse diseases, or even beings unable to survive. And here's the chilling detail. Some of these studies reportedly succeeded in altering genes effectively, but were halted due to ethical and political concerns. After all, who would have the right to decide what a human should be? Today, technologies like CRISPR have reignited this debate, and countries are grappling with how far we should go. But in the past, much of this was simply swept under the rug out of fear of opening a Pandora's box. And here's the final provocation. What if someone in secret has already created the first genetically modified human? Now for the grand finale, let's bring all these forbidden experiments together and reflect. What would humanity be like if they had succeeded? After diving into these forbidden experiments, it's impossible not to wonder, how far would humanity go in the name of science? Transplanted heads, manipulated memories, controlled reigns, bombs in space, attempts at immortality, and even tampering with the code of life. Each of these stories shows that the line between genius and madness is thinner than we think. It's as if we're always dancing on the edge of an abyss. On one side, discoveries that could save millions. On the other, risks capable of destroying everything we know. The question that echoes is, were we saved because these projects were stopped? Or did we miss the chance to change the world in ways we'll never get back?